welcome to ESPN FC Live, fresh off some Premier League action. What looked to have been, at least on paper, quite an interesting matchup between Manchester United and Chelsea. Janusz is joining me to break this one down and see if we can, drag some interesting facts or topics to talk about, Janusz, because it probably wasn't the blockbuster we were expecting as we saw on paper. Before this, we were talking off camera from our earlier hit from the Spurs-Villa game, and I was saying that this was an interesting matchup, to me at least, because last season, around the same time, we were all talking about Manchester United and Chelsea kind of in the same boat. You were wondering what their identity was, what, their best 11 is, where's the real leadership on either side, and exactly where this ship was going. Now, you fast forward to now, we're still talking about that for Manchester United, but it seems like Chelsea had found some identity under Enzo Maresca. But today, it ended at 1 apiece at Old Trafford, a 1-1 draw. Janusz, let's play expectation versus reality. What was your expectation for this game from both sides? And I suppose, what do you think happened?
Yeah, I want a little bit more quality, I think, because at the end of the day, no matter what we say, no matter what the result, who the result favors, what does it mean overall, right? I think we all understood where both teams are. I think in the first half, we saw, ironically, a little bit more maturity from this young Chelsea team, didn't we?
Yeah.
I think, the way they carry the game, neither side had really many chances to speak about, right? And not until second half and late in the second half where the chances and goals came in for the most part. So my expectations were a lot higher after what I at least saw in the first half from Chelsea, because these are the sort of games that you need to take advantage of, right? Especially when the teams above you, the big clubs, are losing points. So I look at Chelsea currently in fourth, even with that 1 point. I thought, what an opportunity to keep that momentum going. We've said it before, Alexis, that as good as Chelsea have been, there are going to be games like these. There's going to be up and downs for them. So I suppose they'll take a point. But the bottom line is, if you look at Chelsea, just to focus in on them a little bit, we'll get to United in a second. If you look at Chelsea, it's a pretty good point considering that, all the key players had horrible games. Horrible. Where was Nico Jackson? Absolutely non-existent whatsoever. Where was Cole Palmer, who we've said may be the best player in the league so far? Absolutely non-existent, right? And where was Noni Madueke? Perhaps if he scored that header in the first half, because that's got to be a goal, maybe that's a little bit different, right? That gives him an excuse. And, you could go on and on and on with the expectation of one player, and that's Caicedo. And then not because he scored a goal, but you can see that those expectations of the biggest transfer out there, his injuries, now he's got the power. He's got the ability to roam everywhere, show his strength, show his quality, something we've talked so much about when just about every team in the league wanted him. So I think from that standpoint, Chelsea, I don't know, Alexis. Happy with a point, the way it ended up going behind. But I think this was a game where they should probably, after the first half, could have won that game if the key players were on.
Yeah, as you were saying, I think this was a huge opportunity for Chelsea to not just get into the top four after 3 of the top 4 originally have lost this Premier League weekend, but to properly cement themselves, try put some distance in catching up and between some of the other big ones. But for this one, I think I would describe this as a bit of a scrappy game, which is good for Manchester United, because when you're not firing on all cylinders, you're not the best version of yourself, but you can lure your opponent into a good scrap, especially at home, which is something that I think was a huge criticism of Manchester United up against Spurs, where they just seemed like they didn't even have that fight back. Today, there was some of that fight back for United. Do you feel that Chelsea just kind of were disrupted in playing how they wanted to play?
Yeah, I think if you look at Manchester United, and we're looking for a lot from a game like this, because let's face it, it was a bad game. It was a bad game. There's no two ways about it. The quality, the passing, the ball. Simple passes going astray from both sides, by the way. But if you look at United, first of all, very good start. Then the Chelsea settle, as we've mentioned. But you can sense it a little bit. We saw that obviously in the game against Leicester City in the Cup, and here the mental change, right? It's almost, I want to say, Manchester United unchained from that pragmatism, from not being happy, from kind of settling for a draw, or maybe settling for a result for a team that even at home play on the counter. This was a different team. And I was actually, to make my point, I was wondering if I should make it, because in the second half, for the longest part, I stopped seeing that. But that end to the game was very, very important, right? Because I just have a feeling under Ten Hag, I think it would have been team that would set behind just a little bit and hope to break on the counter. Well, we saw a team that was actively going for the win, right? I mean, you always risk against a team like Chelsea or against a big club. There's a risk in the end of the game, and you take a point if you can, because it's a massive game. But I just felt that last 10, 15 minutes of the game, I saw that I change. I'm talking about more about mentality of the team, and I guess we got to give Ruud credit for that, and maybe just the change, because as they all know, they're going to have a new manager, and that kind of poses a problem as well, right? Because had he won that game, we'd all be talking here. Why they're getting Amorim, Ruud, one of our own is doing a great job, and he has done a great job, I think. But the bar, let's face it, the bar was so low that when finally kind of you make that change, you get that little bit of a reaction. But I'm digging deep here. I think it was an important one for Manchester United.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely get more into United in a bit, because they still will constantly remain the talking point in this one. Just a quick one, though, from the Chelsea perspective. Do you feel like Enzo Maresca and company might feel a little hard done with the fact that maybe Lisandro Martinez should have been sent off for a challenge on Cole Palmer just there in the dying embers of the game? He eventually got a yellow, but a lot were saying that he was quite lucky to just get the yellow. What do you think?
Not me, not even close. Let's not be sending players off for something like that, right? I mean, there was absolutely no excessive force. I mean, did he want to make a little bit of a statement there? Absolutely. As a player, he caught him there a little bit, grazed him, and people going, yeah, orange, maybe red. I'm totally not in that camp, because I want to keep players on, and especially for something like this, because there was zero excessive force in that.
You know what, Cole Palmer, welcome to South American football, right? That's a nice little lesson for him there. But talking about Manchester United now, as we said, it's kind of so hard to judge them exactly on what we saw right now, because we know that it is yet another transitional period for them. They're waiting for a new manager, a new style, a new identity. We're hoping when Ruben Amorim comes in next week. But this was also a perfect match and a big enough opponent, Janusz, to put out a big message and kind of, put on a big display for the new manager to let him know, look, whatever plans you have, whatever style you want to play, I want to be a part of your 11. I deserve to be a part of your starting 11 week in, week out. From what you saw from Manchester United, who kind of helped themselves and who probably did not?
Yeah, I don't know if this is a game that, a lot of the players are going to look back and say, I've impressed the new manager, who was, I'm sure, watching this game, because really, I've mentioned, I've been strongly opinionated about some of the Chelsea players that didn't deliver. Let's be honest here, a lot of players didn't deliver here as well. And let's forget for a second the last few minutes of the game where we saw Garnacho, because for the most part, this is not the Garnacho that we've seen in the past. I've talked about Højlund. I have massive doubts, even though it was because of him that they got the penalty. It was a great ball from Casemiro. Yeah, that first touch was lacking. Top player probably receives that ball and maybe with the next touch puts it away. But I just don't know if you can ever, Amorim or not, if you can count on Højlund to consistently give you, 15, 20 goals, or maybe 20 plus, if you look at some of the key players on big teams. That's what you're going to have to do. That's going to be Amorim's job, because he's not going to get any players. I think in January, who knows, maybe he'll get one or two. I don't know if that's possible for Manchester United. Let's not forget, we saw two teams that spend more money than anybody else in that last window, or just in general, right? So you expect a lot more, and Amorim, all he can do for a little bit is to set out his ideology. That's for sure. I think I heard him say something that, in a way, it's good where Manchester United are at the moment, because I'll be able to do what I want to do without, I don't want to say without pressure, because there's always pressure at Manchester United, but maybe in a different way. So look, I'm not changing my mind. I mean, he knows that Casemiro's got to be out. I mean, his time, great ball, couple good things, but to do that consistently, game in and game out, you need a workhorse in that midfield. So that's not going to happen. Højlund, big question mark. Garnacho, I think he can improve. Marcus Rashford, as I said, I think that story has been told, and I almost think that is best for both the player and Manchester United. I would have to assume, I still think he's a good enough player that given an opportunity elsewhere, a fresh start, being an English international, you can probably get a lot of money for Rashford. That's where I would go. But, maybe Amorim, is special, and maybe he gets something out of him that others couldn't, with the exception of that one season. Huarte, good against Leicester City. Today, average at best, right? Defensively, I thought, Manchester United were okay. Neither Manchester United or Chelsea were dangerous for, say, 75 minutes of the game.
Well, one of the things, too, when we're talking about Manchester United, as you pointed out, of course, when Amorim comes in, he will probably have to wait for the January transfer window so that he can get one or two players that he may like that will fit his style and identity. But we all know, Janusz, that the January transfer window is not the ideal window to really build your squad. So he still has at least another 2 months plus the rest of the season to try and right this ship somehow. And one main problem that's glaring us in the face is that Manchester United are struggling big time, not just to score goals, but to create goals. There seems to be such a lack of creativity, barring Bruno Fernandes, here and there as well. I mean, they brought up a stat, I think, mid-game that United, in terms of the least goals scored in the Premier League, United have just one more than Southampton. I don't think that's the level they want to be on, especially considering Southampton are just freshly promoted from the second division. So what do you think is the creativity issues going on there, and how do they at least address it in the short term?
Yeah, I think this is going to be more of a team function, right? Rather than looking for somebody to pull a rabbit out of a hat, you're going to talk, obviously you're going to see a 3-4-3 or variation of that. I just think there's going to be more of a how do we press? How do we get the ball further up the pitch? How do we condense space so others can hurt us? And by virtue of that, we're much closer to the goal, because then, you're talking about, rather than building all the way out of the back, which I'm sure they're going to try to do, you're talking about possibility of Bruno Fernandes being on the ball much more often and much more closer, right? And others will probably benefit from that, as Kobe Mainoo is very much capable of doing that as well, right? Maybe Diallo, some of these players now on the attack feeling much more confident because now they're dictating the proceedings. Maybe that's the case, because it's not like you're going to find a player now out of nowhere who's going to give you that creativity. So I think at a time like this, when you can't go to the market, you have to be creative and you have to work on a couple of things. And as I mentioned, high press, recovery of the ball much quicker, and set pieces, of course, because that's always kind of a bit of a freebie, whereas we've seen many teams, Arsenal notwithstanding, but others as well, taking advantage of that, because every team should be taking advantage of that these days.
All right. Well, I suppose we will leave it there then. Janusz and I are going to look for some entertainment elsewhere, because unfortunately that one did not deliver as we were hoping so. But as we know, both teams still very much works in progress. One thing's for sure, though, the incoming manager, Ruben Amorim, definitely has quite the job on his hand, Janusz. We will see exactly how he does in his first couple of games at Manchester United when they start next week. Janusz, thank you so much. Thanks to everyone for watching, and we'll catch you next time on ESPN FC Live.